see you all here today. It's wonderful seeing this response. I'm just going to briefly introduce Mr. Gordon and then let him get up and talk. He also has a short tape to show you as well as part of the presentation. As you know, this is Mr. Lewis Gordon, who is a veteran of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which was one of the part of the international brigades, the volunteers who went to Spain to fight for the Republican side during the Spanish Civil War in 1936-39. Mr. Gordon spent approximately in Spain precisely doing that. After he got back, and I'm going to move over here for just a second so that I can get my notes at this point. He, with the exception of the Second World War years, he has worked for the Union, the United Paper Workers International Union, from 1939 up to and including 1997. During the war, from 41 to 45, he served in the U.S. Combat Engineers in the European Theater of Operations, and he was among the first American troops to liberate the Dachau concentration camp. He has studied labor relations at Cornell and New York University. With regard to his union position, he returned to that union position as a negotiator, an arbitrator, and a lobbyist in Washington. He retired in '86, but then he came back to direct the union's retiree organization. He's on the National Committee of the Veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, and he's lectured quite a bit on this topic of the Civil War. He's here today with his wife, Anne. They live in upstate New York, and they operate an antiquarian bookshop, and his wife, Anne, serves in the county legislature. In November of 1996, he and about 400 other veterans of the Civil War went back to Spain for a reunion, where, amongst other things that happened, they were honored by being offered citizenship, Spanish citizenship. So without any more words, I'd like to present Mr. Gordon.
I just wrote my notes down. But I want to add two things. I let her keep that gas in a liquid so that you'll understand what kind of presentation you're getting. And the other one was that the gentleman who came up with the camera thing, I noticed was from the pathology department. I wonder if there's a message in there somewhere. I hope not. The other message I don't want is that I got a glass of water with an unfortunate color if you're talking about what I am on the spectrum in the political. You know, the Franco group referred to us as Los Rojos. And so you should not have given me a red cup. Well, the rest I'll have to do winging.
Can we all hear back there? Yes?
All right, or you want me to speak a little louder?
A little louder.
Okay. So I want to cover how the recruitment of soldiers who volunteered, how they volunteered and what the route was, who got us to volunteer, or who was the mechanism through which we moved from New York to Madrid. And there's also, you know, I might have said something about the Los Rojos. The reason the Rojos were Los Rojos is that the Communist International, Communist Party of the different countries, recruited people to go to Spain to form up the International Brigade. That's not to say that the brigade then was all communist, because the majority were not. But there were people who were involved in many activities which crossed liberal causes. Somebody stood up and said to me, I think it was in Swarthmore, were you a communist? And I said, well, normally I wouldn't answer that because I don't think it's germane. It's not what we're talking about. But I'll answer it because I want you to understand where I'm coming from. And I said, no, I was not. I am not. But there were many, many areas of activities where the things that I stood for and was in favor of crossed the Communist Party lines. And one of them was trade union activity. The other one was activity in school. But I'll skip from that point to what the recruiting device was. I went down and was interviewed by 3 or 4 people in a small hall in New York City because somebody gave me a piece of paper, here's where you would go. They questioned me. I think their leanings were just to eliminate people who were involved in anything that they were really very much against. And so they filtered out some people, but very few. I think at that point they were taking almost anybody who made it through the door. I went for a physical exam, and the next thing I knew, I was on the pier of the Holland American line sailing for Europe. The way people went to Spain at that point, now this is early June of 1941. I'm sorry, early June of 1937. I'm trying to let you know I'm not as old as I am. The League of Nations had an embargo on anybody going to Spain for purposes of assisting either side. The embargo was on all equipment, transit equipment, arms, ammunition, and so on. When I went for a passport, which I was asked to do, my passport had a stamp on it, which said, "This passport is not valid for travel in Spain," as big as life. Inserted also was a chapter and verse of the Federal Code, which applied to should you go, what then happens to you. And it was pretty daunting. What it said was that you lose your citizenship and you go to Leavenworth for 20 years. Well, that's sort of, you would think that would discourage. I don't think anybody was discouraged. I don't think one person paid much attention to it. Of course, half of them got killed and couldn't be prosecuted anyway, but the other half did come home. We'll get to that. In order to go to Spain then, you needed to go a circuitous route because the Pyrenees between France and Spain were lined with troops from 8 or 10 different countries representing the League of Nations. It would be like United Nations troops in different places around the world. These troops were put there in key spots to prevent anybody from crossing the Pyrenees. You certainly couldn't take a train and go there or take a car or a bus. And the way that we went was that we walked over the Pyrenees. The interesting feat that is that most of the people had never climbed a hill. Most of the people, not most, but a lot of them were city folk who barely saw a blade of grass in their town. We were taken through France through towns that had friendly councils elected, friendly mayors, and so that we made it down to Perpignan very easily. You got to Perpignan, which is right close to the border. We were picked up by buses and taken to the foothills of where, if you crossed the line, you were in the Pyrenees. And it was around dusk, and when it started to get dark, we formed a single file. There were about 40 or 45 of us, different countries, not all Americans. And we followed we had our leader was a short, stocky Spaniard with a beret who was a smuggler and had been smuggling things back and forth all his life, and his family smuggled them, and he was going to smuggle us in. He spoke no Spanish. I'm sorry, he spoke no English or all the other languages that were present. And so a couple of words of instructions, and immediately followed by a couple of words in about 8 languages. And they were simply as no talking, no smoking, no getting out of line, just walk, don't make a sound. We began to walk, and we walked until dark and all through the night. During the walk, people slid off into snowbanks, fell into irrigation ditches. It was a pretty wild time. And made it there. There were some people who didn't make the walk, was stopped, very few, but he took us in such a route that if the mountain went like that, and there was one that was like that, he always headed for the one that looked impossible. And they didn't have troops up on the top of those at all. And so we somehow clambered through the whole thing. We got to Spain at dawn, mist, couldn't see where we were, and somebody said, well, I think it was our smuggler. He said, España! And everybody cheered. And it was a very thrilling moment. And then we got under trees and we stayed there for the rest of the day, waiting for transportation. We were taken to a fort nearby. We made our way down to the base through Barcelona, Madrid, and so on, which is a town called Albacete. Albacete was the base town of the International Brigade. And there, I because of a freak of just what happens to anybody that isn't planned, what happened at that point is I was with a whole lot of my friends. And we were determined to stick together. At that point, we were in a bull ring in Albacete, and it was strewn with all kinds of pieces of uniforms. Big pile of pants, big pile of shoes, big pile of everything. No 2 uniforms the same. Most of it World War I vintage. And well, we got into our outfit. Very few of the things fit anybody. All I knew is that I had to take 3 steps before I caught up to the front of my pants. Never heard that one, did you? At any rate, oh, what a good idea. There was a real crying need for people in that group. We were all lined up all over the place, mixed, everything was mixed in nationalities, and the translations were just rampant. The language of the brigade at that point was French, because it had been formed by the French Communist Party. And they had everything in French, all the orders of the day, all the speeches, all everything. And then they would do the translating. There was a convoy of large trucks lined up outside the bull ring, and they were looking for people to drive the trucks. And you know, most of the people who came from any of the other countries did not own cars or drive anything, let alone a big lumbering truck. I had driven a truck during the summer when I went to school for a candy place. Drove the truck and ate candy. And my friend, who I thought was my friend up to that point, as the man went by and he asked for volunteers, we didn't get any volunteers in that group. Just nobody could drive. This guy, we'll call him Smo, what's his name, said, hey, he drives a truck. The next thing I knew, I was behind the wheel of this truck. What I didn't know is that was the end of my being with any of them for 6 months. I didn't know that I was going to be on a completely different front from where they were. I didn't know that whatever they went into an action at that point, and we went into one down below, that no Americans at all. And I was assigned to a Spanish outfit and took Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4 all in a week. The method was mostly drawing pictures on the ground, playing charades with each other, and we had a wonderful time. You know, somebody would point to a horse and say, "That's a house," or whatever it is. They played all kinds of games. Anyway, I got to speak Spanish to them. I drove behind another truck behind me with no lights, over mountainous roads that had no railings, and we were at it for, I would say, for about 14 hours. We got no sleep, except that every once in a while, and it was very rare, they would stop, and I would just flop over the wheel. And the truck was heavily loaded. There was no place to put anybody but me. But anyway, I would take the rest. Somebody would wake me up. And well, of course, at the age I was at, none of this mattered too much. Right now, I'm getting sleepy. We got down to Cordoba area, and quick story is that we stopped in a town called Hinojosa del Pueblo. And Hinojosa was a small place with white houses, with 3-4 foot walls, with cobblestones, which weren't made for even a go-kart. That when we drove into the center of town, where the trucks parked in all different levels, they said, "Now take a break. Take any of that row of houses there's 4 houses, go in and get out of the sun and go to sleep." It was about well over 100 degrees in that square. I went into this house ready to just drop dead, and there was a series of rooms without any furniture in it. There were a couple of places where there's some bodies lying, sleeping. I picked a room that looked empty, and I got in and lied down, and there was another person in there breathing, and so, but I don't know, I went to sleep, didn't matter. At some point, when this piece of meat and me woke up, I heard this voice said, "Where you from?" Turned out that his name was Tommy Page. He was a black man from New York City, and he had gone to the same high school I went to, Boys High in Brooklyn. He went to Boys High, and we kept talking. I had come 5,000 miles or something, climbing mountains and breaking my chops and meeting my friend from Boys High. Let me see if I got a note to this so I can go on. What does it say? Okay. I know that most of you, if not all of you, have seen A Good Fight. I know that many of you have read some of the material. The story of Spain is in movies and radio and TV. It's everywhere. And so I don't think there's any, you're not going to get me to give you a military history of anything or a discussion of how the battle came out. Well, we know how it came out. But what I would like to do is mention one item that is similar to another item that what happened to me in World War II, and that is that when I got down to where the front was, there was a visiting group of a number of people from newspapers and a number of high muckamuck officers in the Spanish Army, and they were standing around this thing that I was about to look at. And what it was that the Moors were very heavily represented down there. The Moors, volunteers who helped Franco right at the beginning. They had buried, well, I only saw 3, but they had buried these 3 men up to their neck. You see this in old pictures about India with Douglas Fairbanks or something. They were buried to their neck. Oh, they were dead, but they had been there obviously for a very long time. The sun had burned them very badly. And at least one of them, somebody had set on fire. And this was, I found out later, the normal practice of the way the Moors treated prisoners, the way the Moors felt about death and fighting. The Moorish soldiers felt that anybody who dies in battle goes to this very special place. It's the best thing that can happen to you. We thought that too. And one of the things that the Spaniards did to the Moors, and I concur entirely, was they would not, if they caught a Moor as a prisoner, they would not shoot him. They would not do anything except some pretty nasty things to his body, which would prevent him from going through the turnstile to wherever Allah sent him. The 6 months after I came to Cordoba, there was an enormous battle that took place running across the center of Spain, in which they were trying to cut off Valencia from Madrid and cut Spain in half so that the southern part would be all of under Franco control. And when that happened, we were pulled out of Cordoba, in panic state. We really had to move, and everybody just ran for cover, heading for where the line would be closed, and this included soldiers who were in hospitals, soldiers who couldn't walk at all, and you found them all over the roads making their way as fast as they could to the line. See, now that my wife left, I can speak freely. Now let me tell you about my sex life in Spain. All right. I drove a truck again that was packed full of people who were invalided. Quick, tell me. They were wounded. They couldn't walk. And I headed very as fast as I could for the bridge that was at a place called Tortosa. Tortosa was right on the Mediterranean, below Tarragona, below Valencia. And I got over that bridge. Now I don't know how much time, we have a big discussion about it. It wasn't much after that bridge was blown to bits, and everybody else had to get across the Ebro River. And I don't know how I would have made it. I think I would have, well, I'm here. The river, the Ebro is a river that has cross currents that are so powerful that the men who were, I know some of them were really powerful swimmers who got into the water, and the only way they made it was to swim for a while and then let the water take them where it's going. And so they would end up miles and miles down where the current took them from where they were crossing. They couldn't cross this way. They would cross like that. And scores of men drowned. And the ones who came at a time when Franco troops were behind them were shot in the water. But a lot of them did get across. And the stories never stopped. When they regrouped on the other side, we'd sit around, and along would come two men, stark nude, shivering, but happy they made it. And we give them some clothes, and then they're back in action. I can't waste a lot of time on this, can I? You in a hurry? You going anywhere? Let me tell you about Teruel. Teruel is a city, a big city, on top of a mountain. And Teruel was referred to at that point, a battle that took place in December was referred to as the North Pole or Greenland. It's tough enough to be in the field as a soldier because you don't have cover and you wear the same clothes and so on. But to have killing cold is very, very hard. The Loyalists had just gotten a shipment from the Skoda Works in Czechoslovakia of guns and ammunition. The reason for that was that Hitler was about to take the country over, or it was just being handed to him, and the Skoda Works shipped all this stuff to the Spanish Loyalist Army. And so as a consequence, we took Teruel, which was supposed to be impossible. It not only was in an impossible place, it was just a big city, heavily fortified, full of Franco soldiers, and somehow we chased them out. I know that when we got there, I went into a house where whoever had been there, some of the Spanish officers had sat around, had just barely finished a half a cup of coffee. The coffee was warm. They really ran for cover. But it was also known that when Franco's army, when the Germans and Italian groups counterattacked, that there was no way in hell that they could hold on to Teruel. So it was a foregone conclusion that it would be taken back again. The trick was to make them pay a good price for it, and also to get everything we could out of the town. And so they began this business. And here I am with this truck again. This business of bringing in, at one point, bringing in ammunition and bombs and whatever else, grenades, and then coming out with material things, with things that they needed that had to do with, whether it was chemical or tires or whatever. And I had one experience that wasn't just as simple as that. The experience was, ran back and forth. It was cold, it was no big deal. Any of you read George Orwell's book about Homage to Catalonia knows he was always miserable, and he always complained about how bad things were, and should have stayed home. The incident that happened to me that I want to share with you is that there was a brigade headed by a general named Enrique Lista. General Lista was one of the most active crack armies that the Loyalists had. Lister, anyway, to be with the Listers, even for a week or a day, was really an honor. They're just a great, great outfit. And I came along and unloaded whatever I had to unload, and turned around to sort of follow the routine of where I was supposed to go back and get whatever they were going to give me. It wasn't my decision as to what to take. But a couple of the Lister officers commandeered the truck and took me to a place where they had, the ground was just littered with wounded men. And they didn't have any way to bring them to first aid or hospitals or anything. And they couldn't treat them, they couldn't do anything. Just the whole triage setup was. And what they wanted me to do is to take as many as I could and bring them to any place where there's first aid. Hospitals are too far back. Well, anyway, they loaded these men, and they really overloaded, and the truck just was that color. I started out to go, I had to know where, I had trouble finding Johns Hopkins. Trying to find a first aid station was even harder. What I did was I drove to where there was any kind of concentration of troops, so that they would be, somebody who has been hurt would be taken to wherever he's going to go, and I just follow them. But it was just, the whole thing was much too chaotic. I took the road, whatever road I took, and found a first aid station run by an Austrian doctor and his nurses. He had wounded under all the trees, and they were going through their triage setup. The ones that were going to die anyway, they ignored, and so on. They wouldn't let me unload. And you know, how long do you keep driving and looking for a place to take these people? Well, the first one that didn't let me unload, I sort of understood, you know, they're not going to take care of them anyway. So off I went for number 2. Well, when I got to number 3, I was turned down twice in a row. Nobody was going to take them. Well, at least 3 or 4 of the men aboard were already dead. And it was nighttime by that time. And I decided that, I don't know, I have to live with this sometime. I decided that I'm not going to ask anybody what I should do. I'm just going to go to a place where they can be comfortable and take them off. Not to go talk to who's in charge and say, well, I've got 40 men aboard, what do I do? And so they were unloaded, and somewhere along the unloading, some Austrian doctor read the riot act to me about you can't do that. But I told him, yeah, well, I'll stop in a minute. Anyway, I got into the truck and left. I suppose that if I were he, I'd have shot me. But he was not me, so I'm here. That was a terrible story, isn't it? All right, now I'm going to go quickly to, I just generally, I talked to you about how I got there, and I talked to you about some of the little anecdotes that might not appear in literature as much. You can get all the ones you want in literature. And so I want to talk now for a minute about how I got out and came home. I didn't do that. That's a commentary on my talk. Sounds like a raspberry, right? Somebody told them to turn it off anyway, didn't they, before?
Yeah.
At the time that, I'm talking about post-Teruel and post, there was, I haven't covered the recrossing of the Ebro because there was another last sort of shot that took place and a wonderful plan to cross this horrible river where people drowned and didn't make it and had retreated quite a way. It was decided that we were all going to go back again and cross the river. The bridges were all gone. And so they went into reconstructing beginning to reconstruct some of the work that you have to do to put some kind of pontoon bridge up or something. But they also assembled boats, a lot of boats. And the Brigade, not the Lincoln, but everybody, big group, recrossed the Ebro and took Franco by surprise and went further than where they had been in inroads into fascist territory. It was a miracle, but it was also, again, the kind that when you exhaust yourself, you have to be ready for a counterattack. You don't exhaust yourself to the point of not having any reserves. If you don't have any reserves, then they're going to walk all over you, even faster than before, because you're all spent. But it was decided, spent or no spent, that's what's going to happen. As fate would have it, while we were, it's getting madder. No, don't do that. You'll miss my pearls of wisdom. He saw his opportunity to leave. Anyway, lost my train of thought. The thing that happened, which was saved the rest of us, and the reason that anybody is here to talk about it, is that the League of Nations were met to discuss the Spanish situation as it was, and the Prime Minister of Spain, a man named Juan Negrin, made an offer to the League of Nations, and the offer was that all foreign troops be withdrawn from Spain, and it's a Spanish problem, and let them solve it. Of course, how could Franco agree to that? Well, as soon as he did that, he'd be out of the country. At that point, he had over 20,000 expert flyers from Germany. The Condor Legion was there. 100,000 men at a time. Divisions of Italian troops came over in full regalia and full equipment. Whereas on our side, they were just about up to throwing rocks. Negrin knew that, but he made the offer, and then he followed it up. And he said, we'll remove all foreign troops unilaterally to show you what kind of war it is. That it's not a foreigners' war. It's not Russia fighting our way into Spain or something. So we were in the process then of being withdrawn. When the withdrawal started, the battle was on for them coming back again, and they were really on the march, the fascists. We went up to a little city called Ripoll, R-I-P-O-L-L, which was in the foothills of the Pyrenees in Catalonia, and the United Nations had sent down 6 generals from 6 different countries, with a British general who had been in India as the chair, and they interviewed every vet. They took all the dope down in the withdrawal scheme, and since our passports had been lifted long before that, we were giving sort of a safe conduct paper to go directly but not stop between Ripoll and the port we're leaving from. And so that the bulk of the men that I was with went on 3 big steamships. I went on a little dopey one called the Ausonia. The Paris went out. There were a whole bunch of them. And went back to the United States. We got back, and we didn't go to Leavenworth. This whole the feelings of the country were completely different at that point. Chamberlain had been discredited, and we had cheering crowds, actually. And I want to tell you about, and then I'm going to show you a little tape. There was a parade in Barcelona that it took place. We came from Ripoll down south toward Barcelona, and walked down the Ramblas, and walked down a couple of big avenues. We were treated, well, let me tell you that the ground was covered up to your ankles in flowers. Young women rushed out and kissed us. Men rushed over and made us drink a good shot of wine. Kissed and shook hands and cried, and that's how we left. In 1996, the Spanish Cortes, their Congress, passed a bill that could never have been passed before. It had come up a number of times, offering us citizenship and honoring us in every way that they can. And it was as a consequence of the leader of the loyalist group, the spokeswoman named Pasionaria, Dolores Ibarruri, who made this very emotional speech talking about that when peace comes, we'll all be invited back. and given citizenship and given everything and everything. And of course, they went away for 37 years. 1996, the bill came up a number of times and it could not pass. Never got to a vote. Couldn't pass because they felt the wounds were still too fresh. There still were people around, who had busily killed each other's relatives. And in 96, Anne was standing outside the chamber. We visited Spain just on a visit in 95. In 95, the bill came to the floor and was passed. It was passed unanimously. It was passed by the right-wing parties as well as the left-wing parties in the middle. It was the first big healing sign that everybody accepted. Even though by the time we were offered the citizenship the next year, the federal government there had been replaced by a more conservative group, but the outlying cities and towns and areas were still Democratic outfits. Well, that's a Democratic outfit too. And we went back to Spain last year, and this tape, that's not too long, I hope you can stay, will show you how we were greeted. You get the feel, the way the people looked at us and talked to us. And it was the same parade. It was in Barcelona. It was the same parade in every way, except that the young girls who kissed us weren't born yet. But their mothers weren't born yet. And the same scene, it's like going to a Pete Seeger concert. Their average age is always 20. For 40 years, the average age is 20. In any case, how did I get him in? Listen to this. Also, it's a good film because I'm in part of it. I know what I forgot to tell you. Oh, I got it. No, I'll watch this first. What I was going to tell you, I'll tell you, and then you'll see what I want to do with it. When we came to Spain in '95, one of the leading guys of our vets, named Charlie Nusser, had died, and he asked that his ashes be strewn on this battlefield of Jarama in front of Madrid. And we went to Spain at that point, and I was asked to participate in an event that I've never done, named Strewing Ashes. Well, you can't strew your own ashes. And so when I did it, I felt that, you have to have some kind of ceremonial feeling, what am I trying to say? What I did was, we also had 50 or 60 students, graduate students, who came to the cemetery from one of the Syracuse University group. What I did was, I said a couple of words, right on the battlefield, and that battlefield is intact. You can still find hunks of shrapnel, you still find some fortifications, and it's full of American bodies, American bones. And so it's untouched. It's a big graveyard. When I finished talking, I thought, when you have a memorial service, you ought to have music. And so, no, I didn't sing. And what I decided, I play the harmonica. What can you do? The best you can. I told them that I want to play a song, but I want to explain what the song is. It's called Hans Beimler, and it's to the tune of an old German soldier song called Alte Kameraden, Old Comrades. And it's very haunting, and it was very prevalent, very much sung and whistled in Spain as long as we were there. Hans Beimler was a leader of one of the brigades. So when we finished the film, if you want to leave while it's dark, you won't hear me play the harmonica. You got it? Take it. Thank you. Don't applaud. What?
Questions?
while she's doing this, anybody who wants to stay, as long as you want to stay, has any questions, I'll field any questions. I may not answer them all, but any questions you ask will be listened to, and I urge you to stay. Be very happy to spend the time with you.
Turn the light off or not? Yes. Is this where this begins? Okay.
You need the light on.
Yeah, we should turn the light off. Is that this right here? Okay. Can you all see?
Oh, that's good enough.
But only 400 remain. Survivors of war, revolution,
Can you hear?
concentration camps, these
Louder.
are veterans of the International Brigade. 16 years later, the volunteers for freedom have returned to remember the past, take flowers to the dead, and receive a long overdue and unexpected ovation.
For the first time in the history of the people's struggle, we have seen the wondrous sight of the International Brigade, formed to defend the freedom and independence of a country under threat, our Spain. Communists, socialists, anarchists, Republicans, men of different races, different ideologies, different creeds, but all men with a profound love of freedom and justice, came here and offered themselves to us with no conditions. They gave us everything they had, their youth, their maturity, their knowledge, and their experience, their blood and their lives, their hopes and their passions, and they asked nothing in return. Nothing but a part in the struggle, the honor of dying for us.
Belgrade, capital of Serbia and Yugoslavia, where the Southern and Danube rivers meet. The war in Bosnia led to a United Nations embargo, and Belgrade is now an impoverished city.
Es un monumento modesto
This simple monument
erigido en memoria de la
was erected in memory of the Yugoslav volunteers who fought with the International Brigade.
Reza en este monumento dice las brigadas internacionales
The inscription reads,
que formaron en
"The
España
International Brigades were formed in Spain in 1936
por voluntarios de 50
by volunteers from
países
53 countries
que acudieron a la
who
ayuda
heroically
de
aided the Spanish people in their fight against fascist aggression."
lucha contra la agresión fascista.
Tito's Museum of the Revolution is now closed to the public and may never open again. Albert Adnan, a former brigadista, secured permission to show us the room dedicated to the Yugoslav soldiers who fought in Spain.
Encontrarán aquí fotos
These are photographs of the volunteers for freedom
voluntarios de la
who
libertad
held more or less
que más o menos
important military or political positions in Spain.
militares o políticos en España. Y habiendo regresado
And having returned to Yugoslavia,
estos mismos
these same men
hombres ocuparon
held military commands with different duties.
de distintos dirigentes, etc. Ahora,
Today, in all of what used to be Yugoslavia,
antes de
before it was torn apart,
desmembrado, vivimos unos 46.
there were 46 of us in the whole country.
Yugoslavia actual.
Today, there are only 16 left. The headquarters of the Association of Former Brigadistas houses many memories of past glories. Some of men who are preparing to travel to Spain to receive homage were generals, ambassadors, or high-ranking officials in the former Yugoslavia. These men lived through 10 years of war and concentration camps, but they also lived 40 years of power. And it is hard now to recognize the young idealists they used to be. But just talking about the old days is enough to strike a spark. More than 40,000 young men from all over the world fought to defend the Spanish Republic. Many of them were communists, but there were also socialists and anarchists. They were workers, artists, students, labor leaders, politicians. Almost all of them entered the country in secret, defying the international blockade. They had neither military experience nor a military spirit, but they became outstanding fighters, bound together by a shared resistance to fascism.
I still have the letter I wrote my parents from Paris, telling them what I'm telling you now. I told them, after this, there'll be a world war. We were afraid that if Spain lost, if the Spanish people lost their republic, the fascists would attack other countries, including our own. And that's exactly what happened. We were tremendously impatient. Why so much training? We wanted to fight. We weren't there to march up and down. We were there to fight. That was always uppermost in our minds. We thought about it constantly. We were filled with enthusiasm when we marched off to the front. We knew that war is war. The shots are fired. But in war, people die. The first international battalions were formed in the fall of '36. They went into battle just a few weeks later. Eventually, 4 brigades were formed and made part of the regular army because nobody wanted to be part of a sort of foreign legion. In fact, half the men in these companies were Spaniards. The Volunteers for Freedom fought in all the major battles, and half of them died. Today, the survivors are over 80 years old. The Spanish Parliament has unanimously voted to honor the Republic's promise and award them Spanish citizenship. They all say that Spain is their second home, but Albert Abenon has more reasons than many for saying this, because he's a Sephardic Jew. I'm waiting for my Spanish citizenship. I've been waiting for 500 years, ever since the Inquisition. They're not giving me Spanish citizenship. It's not an award. They're just giving back what they took away from me over 400 years ago. I'm so happy to be going back that I would be willing to risk my life again. I wouldn't care if I died while receiving public recognition of the fact that we came here to fight for our ideals. And not for some kind of petty interest.
The excitement about the trip makes the years weigh less heavily. Even the after effects of heart attacks are almost forgotten. And the journey might console the veterans from Eastern Europe for their ideological disappointments and the material difficulties of recent years. Sado Kapar has come from Sarajevo and travels with his Serbian companions.
It's an historical fact. It's very important, not just for Spain, but humanity, or for peace. For freedom, democracy, and social progress. A very great man in our revolution, General Dachau.
Who is he?
Beko Dachau. A very great man in our revolution. He commanded an army.
I can't find words to express my feelings. That's all I can say.
In Madrid Airport, hundreds of former brigadistas and their families are beginning to arrive. The Yugoslavs and the Danes land almost simultaneously, many of them carrying flags or banners. Almost all of them have been back to Spain before, but this time it's an official visit, and they are coming back together.
Cherry Camper. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you from Madrid?
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks from all of us.
No, thank you.
In the hotel lobby, the ex-soldiers begin returning past battle.
You got my little badge?
It was raining, and they were firing on us from all sides. I said to myself, if they don't kill me today, they'll never kill me. I'm crazy about Spain, and that's all that matters. They arrested me 2 days before, and let me go 2 days after.
I want to say that although we are here honoring the International Day, we should never ever forget that it was the Spanish people who carried the brunt of the fighting.
The day after their arrival, the Brigadistas traveled to the outskirts of Madrid to a bridge over the Jarama River where a monument is unveiled. The Arganda Bridge was a strategic spot. It has been restored and will be preserved as a memorial. It is one of the first places where the brigades went into combat, fighting to defend Madrid from siege. That was at the beginning of 1937. Many men died here, but the bridge did not fall to Franco's troops. One of the speakers is Milton Wolfe, the last commander of the Lincoln Brigade.
That this is a marvelous occasion for us to express our gratitude, first of all, for the amigos, the los brigados internacionales. They were trying to express their gratitude to us for coming here to help them. And my feeling always was that we are grateful for having joined them in their resistance and given us the opportunity to participate in the fight. We are more grateful to you than you are. We owe you more of it.
The veterans have revived the songs and flags of their youth, and they stroll across the bridge with their friends and families. They fought here side by side. Spaniards, Germans, British, French, Yugoslavs. Dozens of television crews from all over Europe interview the Brigadistas, who never tire of describing their battles.
If Franco's troops had taken this bridge and this road, Madrid would have been surrounded. I fought under this flag, so you can understand why I can't help being moved.
Do you have any suggestions or just questions?
To an old pro-independence song.
That's the Irish group.
That night, there was a public event at the sports arena in Madrid. The atmosphere is reminiscent of a leftist political meeting 20 years ago, but with more slogans and Republican flags. The Brigadistas can't believe their eyes, and they are deeply moved. People of all ages come up to greet them. Cuban contingent arrived straight from the airport, tired. Things are a bit chaotic inside the Parliament building. Not everybody can crowd into the main hall, and the whole thing brings to mind some kind of school outing. The President of Parliament and other representatives of Spain's conservative government had failed to attend, which would seem to indicate that old wounds and past bitterness are not yet forgotten. Joan Marcet, the Vice President of Parliament, does the honors in simple ceremony. Friends have arranged an evening of music and conversation in an Irish pub in Madrid. 2 U.S. veterans are the stars of the event.
So the 16 years old, have you 21 years old? No. Do you have any experience in weapons? No, we don't take it. And so I went to another place, same story. And somebody told me, why don't you go to see the anarchists? They take anybody.
The war in Spain was a very big thing in my life and big thing in all our lives. But we did go on to live a little more. You know, we're still here. Not for long, but we're still here, and
I saw the people who were applauding us. And I felt I had to say something. And I said that we Brigadistas had always thought of Spain as our second home, because it's in our blood, because we shed too much blood in this country. And I saw a man about 40 years old, standing there motionless. He didn't say a word, but I saw the tears running down his cheeks. I was so moved, and I said to him, I don't know how to express my feelings, but I think we feel that if I were a woman, I would say that it was here I lost my virginity.
In which a lot of the people were very disappointed. A lot of our people were very disappointed with the fact that nobody from the government showed up. In most cities, they give the key to the city to guests, right? We got the key ring. We got a 28-cent key ring. I thought that was really a sign, some kind of real sign of what they thought about what was happening.
Louis Gordon was an amateur musician and a professional union leader. Like many Brigadistas, he has had an active life. He fought against the Japanese in Burma, where he was a member of the Special Forces. He was a paratrooper fighting against the Germans, and he was investigated, accused of anti-American activities. In the cemetery, there is a common grave. Many men of the 15th Brigade fell on the nearby battlefield and are buried here.
So they knew us, Brigadistas for fun. My comrades and I were here with the Teruel battalion. From February to 12th until May, I was stationed on this front, opposite Dachau.
Yeah, it was me for the last parade in Barcelona by the women of Barcelona in 1958. Which is getting very old. I've been used to funerals and one thing to cover the colors.
Veterans have divided up into groups to visit the battlefields where they fought, as well as the monuments that have been erected in their memory. Lazar Levitsky has done with his wife and 2 sons who live in the United States. He wants to show them where he received his baptism of fire.
Our commander waved his rifle and shouted, "Let's go! Everybody follow me!" And we started running forward. Bang! We threw ourselves on the ground. We got back up again. headed over there. I didn't realize what was happening. When we counted up 10 or 15 days later, out of 600 men in our battalion, there were only 140 left.
When Yugoslav veterans talk about the Spanish Civil War, they speak with pride, even though they lost. But the recent war in their own country is an even greater defeat.
I felt like a Yugoslav. Suddenly Yugoslavia doesn't exist. I can't be a Yugoslav anymore. I was brought up as a Yugoslav. And naturally that fills me with sadness, with longing. Sometimes it throws me off balance. I've tried to think about it as little as possible. It has really affected me. I never imagined it would come to this. No matter what side you're on, it's a completely unjust war.
A group of U.S. students in Madrid visit some of the sites of the Civil War. The veteran Brigadista Milton Wolf is their guide at Belgique, where one of the bloodiest battles took place. Back then, Wolf was known as El Lobo, and he commanded a squad of machine gunners. What he remembers most about the fighting at Belgique were the assaults on this church, which was occupied by Franco's troops.
I like that. I went into the war as a first aid man. And so I was sort of a pacifist against war, so I was in Trinidad. And the only friends I made was in the machine gun company, because they came alone. And so I asked to be transferred into the machine gun company as a water carrier. As a water carrier, because the machine guns were water-cooled. By the third day of Brunette, after 3 days in Brunette action, I was the only one, me and one other man were the only one left on that machine gun squad. And so I had to get behind the gun. And I did. For the next 18 days, I was firing the machine gun. When I came out, I couldn't hear anything. I was dead. And I forgot about pacifism.
Another stop on the sentimental journey through history is the Casca station, where they fought against the cavalry.
Joe Bianca, by the way, you've heard me mention that name several times. He was a seaman, and he was what we call the best soldier in the battalion. He took care of his clothes, he took care of his weapons. He was an excellent machine gunner. His sidekick was a guy by the name of Al Kaufman, who was also a seaman. They were both rank of pilot. Either one of them could have commanded the battalion at least. And they broke up the attack of the cavalry, turned them back. But later on, it was the cavalry that we ran into, a part of our company ran into, and Al Kaufman was sabred there, cut his head off by a horseman running by and was killed, leaving Joe Bianca alone. And he was no longer the same after his sidekick was knocked off.
Were there any deaths that affected you the way you just described the other man being affected by his friends?
Well, when Joe Bianca got killed, you realized that anybody could get killed because he was like immortal. I mean, he was so well together and knew what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And when they got him, you realized that we were all vulnerable. But one thing you have to realize about a jerk like me from Brooklyn, I was busy all the time. I didn't have any time for real introspection.
The Brigadistas have arrived in Barcelona from various parts of Spain. They are exhausted from the trip and shaken by the emotion of it all. A few have fallen ill and dropped out from weariness, and one Brigadista died in Madrid. but the majority are prepared to live through another stirring experience. Inside, the mood is more solemn. Unlike the Madrid Parliament, here there are seats for everyone. There are speeches by some of the Brigadistas, among them the Yugoslav Luigi, and by the authorities. They are welcomed by the mayor of Barcelona, the president of the Catalan Parliament, and the president of the Generalitat, the government of Catalonia.
It is very important that you have come here today to remind us that you fought for dignity, greatness, freedom and justice. And this is important because it is a battle that never ends.
Some of the men in this room lived through a historic moment in Barcelona. In October 1938, the International Brigades marched for the very last time. As a child, Joan Reventós, today President of the Catalan Parliament, watched them go. The government of the Republic decided to disband the International Brigades in the hopes that the League of Nations would force the German and Italian troops to withdraw from the Franco side. Before they left, there was one last parade.
Marching in Barcelona, we left. The treatment, the way people reacted was not something that was necessary to articulate, because it was a feeling tone that struck you as though you could hit the love, the admiration, the concern, the fact that the ground was full of flowers, and we were all kissing us. The feeling that I'm talking about that occurred in Barcelona during the parade had been repeated in Withdrawal and now in Barcelona. We walked through where people cheering, crying, just a tremendous emotional effect. I'm very happy to see young people interested, but they're more than interested, they're dedicated. They're enthusiastic, they're vigorous, they're just as charming and wonderful as can be. And that all put together, you want to know how I feel. I have to go home and rest up. It's a big emotional upset.
The final event in the homage to the International Brigades is held in the sports arena in Barcelona. Once again, it is warm and emotional. There are political groups representing a variety of radical tendencies. Battle cries ring out, flags wave, fists are raised. But isn't there more nostalgia than future in all these symbols? The ideas that move these men and women, solidarity and internationalism, socialism, and social revolution, seem to have been discredited.
When I speak to young people now, this is what I have to tell them about. They have to get involved. And hopefully not go to war, but they have to get involved in what's happening in the country on civil rights, on Social Security, on health care, on all these different things, you know what I'm saying?
We did a lot of good things. But any system grows old after 40 years. It needs to be organized, renewed, made more democratic. Maybe we were already in some kind of crisis, and then nationalism stepped in and tore the country apart. Personally, I always have faith in the future. Failure is hard, difficult. But you can learn from it, and it's from these lessons that you have to see the future. The distribution of wealth has changed so that the top 5% living in the lap of luxury, and we have people all over the streets, sleeping in the streets. I said, well, we're not far away from where we were in 1936, which is not good. But there's always room for improvement. There's always reason to fight.
These veterans played a leading role in the history of our century. They have won wars and lost them. They have been persecuted, and some of them were persecutors. They have done good things and bad, but they will always be able to say that one day, when they were young, they selflessly risked their lives to defend the freedom of a country that was not theirs. And now, 60 years later, this country has given them its thanks.
Turn it on.
I'm not sure what that's doing.
I turn on the lights now.
I must correct something. That is that this was done by Channel 3 in Barcelona. And during the course of the trip, many of us were interviewed by press from every country in the world. And I don't know how many people I talked to, but I do know that this guy got it all wrong so badly, in that you may wonder why I didn't mention my paratroop days and my being both in Europe and Asia at the same time. Can't be done. I was in Europe. I went through Italy, Germany, and Italy, France, and Germany. I never got to the East, thank God. I did go in with the first troops that, I think you said it when you said something about me, with the first troops that went into Dachau concentration camp. And that, I mentioned when I saw the Moors, remember, who had burned these bodies, what happened later that we couldn't prevent is the burning of millions of bodies. And Dachau was a horrible, horrible place. The American Army issued orders to us to take the people in the town that was next to Dachau. They were right, Fürstenfeldbruck is the name of the town, right off the Autobahn. And the people in that town said they never heard of what was going on. They never heard of concentration camps. The smell was so awful in the whole town. The rail yards, which instead of having the normal rail yards you would have for a small town like that, would look like the kind of rail yards you would have in a place like Pittsburgh or New York. And the reason for that is the amount of boxcars coming in with people to be burnt. And the yards were full of people inside the boxcars, nailed shut and left there. And we found them in different stages of either just about to die or half dead, or some that were all right. But they never heard of it, just like people never heard of the Holocaust. But anyway, I didn't go to Burma. Any questions at all now?
Didn't the people in that town wonder what the smell was or what was going on?
They knew damn well what the smell was. They just. Oh, I didn't tell you that. I want to mention. They found out what it was from us, and the method that we found out is the order from above came in every camp that the locals be compelled to go on a tour, and we lined the entire town up and escorted them through every inch of it. They fainted, they vomited, they fainted, we picked them up, and they had to keep going through the whole thing. And I'm sure that group will never forget what they saw. But of course they knew, just like everybody in the world knew. All right?
This is a bit of a selfish question, but I noticed that there was an Irish group there as well. I was wondering, did you meet many Irish people serving in the International Brigade Building? And what was their motivation for going if you did?
Well, you spoke about my favorite subject. I've been back visiting, both of us go to Ireland on a regular basis to meet our buddies over there. The Irish were they were represented on both sides. And the ones that came over with the Father O'Duffy group came over and spent their time in a hotel, and when they were moved up toward where there were loud noises, they decided this is no place for us and went home. That's the extent of the Franco assistance. But as far as the Irish on the other side, they were there with the first that came over, before the brigades even were formed. One of the men that was walking there, what was Michael wearing? His what? Wearing a beret. I don't know if you saw near the Irish flag, but as he and his son Manus. Michael O'Riordan was a commander at that, the last commander of the Irish Brigade. Frank Ryan, you know about Frank Ryan. Frank Ryan led the Irish group. And do you know what happened to him after or not? Yeah, you know about that, okay.
By that, you mean he went to Germany and...
No.
I mean, he was transported there, he was protected from, he died of natural causes, but he was brought over basically to the other side, and he managed to survive for a long time. And then actually the person who was protecting him, I think, was killed under just...
All right, let me help you. Frank Ryan was a prisoner of war, taken by the Franco side. He was supposed to be shot, but the Germans took him to Germany, and their theory was, and what they were going to try to do, is to talk him into going back to Ireland to give the English problems, you know, to get involved in the IRA as much as he can and so on. He refused for a long, long time. At some point, he and another Irishman, you don't know the name of the other one, do you? Were put on a German submarine and taken to Irish waters. And the other man, not Frank, died aboard the submarine of natural causes. And they decided that not to put Frank ashore, and took him back to Germany. And he subsequently died in Germany. He's buried in Dresden someplace. Come on, it's all right.
I'd like to ask this question about after the war and after World War II. During the McCarthy era, could you speak a little bit about the effects of the McCarthy era in your own life?
Well, there is, yeah. There was one thing that they said that was wrong about me to begin with, when they talked about Burma. They also talked about the problems I had with the McCarthy period, and I was picked on and so on. And none of that is true. It certainly is true that many, if not many of the vets were really given a workout by McCarthy, were lost their jobs, couldn't make any money. The ones that had been in Hollywood were put into jail. The ones who, many of the ones writers and musicians and in the arts, just completely lost any income from that point on. My experience was, I don't know if it was unique, but I had been working for the Union before I went to Spain. And before I went to World War II. When I came back, our union is a very large union of small town mills, pulp and paper. They had no problems with any kind of communists or socialists or anything. They, as a matter of fact, a good many of our members kind of highly religious, and they're Republicans, and that was the worst kind. I had no problem at all. I went on the staff immediately and did very well.
3 years after you came back from Spain, you ended up going to fight again in World War II. Did it feel the same, or fighting fascism in one country and then going on and fighting it on a much larger scale? Or did it really, were you once again fighting the good fight?
let me speak for myself, not for the whole group. Well, for the whole group, there was a concerted drive not to allow any of the vets of the brigade to be involved in anything meaningful with respect to going abroad even. They were kept in the United States. After a while, there were orders that said, well, let them go out, but watch your step. And Milt Wolf, who commanded the brigade, where did he go?
OSS.
What?
OSS.
Yeah, not Milt. Oh, anyway, yeah, some of them went to OSS. I don't think Milt did. Milt was when, all during the beginning period, he was in some supply outfit rather than any kind of combat group. My particular experiences, I went to Virginia, and they put me in charge of a small group as a non-commissioned officer and training men. When I finished the 3-month period of my training and then the 3-month period of my training someone else, they sent everybody out except me. They kept me because I was such a good trainer. They kept me right where I was in Virginia for a long time. I swore I'd never go back to Virginia unless they carried me there. You know, carrying me back to old Virginia. And instead I married a lady from Virginia, but I liberated her and brought her to the north. I'll tell you another dumb story, and that is, I begged to go overseas. I volunteered for everything I could think of, and they turned me down. At some point, and I was pretty disgusted with the whole thing. And well, I was pretty disgusted with the way the Army worked most things. At some point, I think that they were losing second lieutenants by the hour rather than the day and the week. And so they moved people up to officers, OCS, the Officers Training School, and were turning out the mill of them. And my outfit got a bulletin came up, and it said that they're looking for people to go to OCS, and they would become second lieutenants. And the requirements were, if you're ready now, one of the requirements was that you have to get a score of 90 on your IQ. Got it? It's almost a Mensa. No. 90, you're very close to a moron. Well, I had formed a relationship with the captain who was my superior. And he liked me and I liked him. He didn't care about what came from above, but he knew he had to limit me, and we got along very well. He called me in, he said, here's your chance. And I said, you know what you can do with it. But I had to take the test. And I got 70, all right? And he called me in and he said, now come on, Gordon. You know you can do that. Well, you're just going to take it again. I said, if I take it again, I'll get a lower mark. I know where I screwed up. Yeah. All right. And so, anyway, I ducked that, but something like a month or 6 weeks later, they mobilized me to a replacement depot, and sent me overseas. And the combat engineers were sort of a recap of what they were putting. Everybody went into infantry or combat engineers because they had no use for people in the air, and they had no use for tank people and so on. And so, it got a little excitement. I was pretty disgusted with a lot of things. I was disgusted with the fact that when you go through towns, you take the town and they turn it over to the Allied military government, the AMG people. Before we even got out of town, they re-nominated the same guy who was mayor under Hitler. They put, the other thing they did was, you notice what the Air Corps did to towns. They bombed the hell out of all the houses that people lived in, workers' houses, and sort of missed the big chemical plant, missed the big automobile plant, because they're all in the same combine. of international corporate people. I sound like I'm an anarchist, but what are you gonna do? I'm not. But I think that they hurt. They didn't hurt the inner structure as what they could have done. They could have bombed a chemical plant. They could have bombed an automobile plant and so on. All right.
Were there any events from your own personal experience in the Spanish Civil War that acted as kind of like a validation for what you traveled overseas to fight there for? Any like real positive images in your head that you saw either with the Spanish people or in the army that you said, yeah, this is really what I'm come across here to fight for?
You're talking about the Spanish Civil War? No question about that. There's a Yale, what was he, a Yale, what's Dollard? You know the first name? No. Somebody named Dollard, D-O-L-L-I-R-D, wrote a thesis on just about what we talked about, what you were asking me about. And what he was studying was, this was before World War II, just before it. What his thesis was, it was called Fear in Battle. And what he was studying was, is a motivated soldier one who fights better, one who doesn't goof off, doesn't get drunk, doesn't desert, and so on. And he said there that the only thing he could study was World War I and the Spanish Civil War. In the Spanish Civil War, the conclusions he came to were that, of course, that the Spanish, the soldiers who went to fight for Spain were motivated, always knew what was going on. There wasn't this mysterious thing that who's winning, what are the objectives, and so on. These were discussed, and sometimes ad nauseum, but the use of equipment, for example. I'll give you another example. When I was with a engineer's outfit, if we had a Jeep, let's say, that got a wheel blown off, they would leave it, just leave it out there to rot. On top of that, then, you would have people who came along, officers who took this broken down Jeep and turned it in, because in order to get a new piece of equipment, you have to turn in whatever happened to the other one. They get a new Jeep and then sell it to somebody. It just never stopped. We made a landing in France, and one of the things that was almost the first thing that the second and third line did was to loot whatever they could find. And so that my outfit did two things. They got a couple of cases of officers' watches. You know, I'm counting 10, 9, 8, and everybody in the outfit suddenly got an infantry officer's watch. They got a couple of cases of sleeping bags that were geared to go to the 10th Mountain Division in Italy. And we went the other way, and it wasn't cold at all, and we all had sleeping bags. There's just an attitude about whatever you can get away with, you get away with. Whatever you never volunteer, you know, that's a definite cry. So yeah, there's a very big difference between the way the International Brigade operated and acted. All right.
You mentioned George Orwell's homage to Catalonia, and he says in his book that when he first got to Spain, he discovered that the situation, the atmosphere in general, was really different from what he had known from the press or from the mass media in general. So I was wondering, first, how you got in touch, let's say, with the Spanish ambience or atmosphere, if it was very different from the previous idea you had before going to Spain, how was your first reaction when you saw what was going on there?
You going to tell me what she said? Well, let me see if I can build it. Are you asking me to compare the ambience of people before the Spanish War and afterward?
No.
No, I
Just
thought.
before you went there. Because just
Listen,
always
will you?
says that the mass media and the press in general described the situation in Spain in a very different way that was happening. So I was wondering if before going to Spain, you had a different idea from the one you had when you went there, when you reached the Pyrenees and you crossed the frontier and everything.
Like, how did the reality of what you confronted in Spain compare with your expectations?
Did she say it right?
I think yes.
Pretty close, yeah.
All right. That's a good question. I have to think about it. Because nothing is perfect, you know, and what I expected, I guess what I expected was perfection, and I certainly didn't get it. The area that I guess, you know, where things were really different, the fact that, you know, I told you before that there was a Communist Party that organized the brigades. Well, they also did something else, which was not good, which was they equated political philosophy with military possibilities. And by doing that, they put their own political big shots in positions of command, which sort of radiates down, and if you really don't know what you're doing, you lose a lot of men. And at the very beginning, well, fortunately for me, now that wasn't quite what happened to me, because the first battles that took place, the Jarama bit, the one at Madrid, and the leadership was all communist, and they sacrificed a lot of troops. And the Americans and the British were hit very hard. As time went on, they were removed. And so that if I had come over just before Jarama, I would have been pretty demoralized. But when I came over, they already had made corrections, and they were making them rapidly. They had to. Does that come in the area that we're talking about?
I think we have time for at least one more question, and then maybe we could hear the music that you promised us.
I had already assumed nobody wanted to hear it. Yeah.
Was there much interaction between you and the militias, and how were they perceived?
But I can't hear you.
Could you repeat that?
I was asking about the militias, and was there much interaction between the international brigades and the militias, and how the perception was in between the relation between the two?
The relationship.
You heard that, right?
Yeah, you say it again.
Well, as I heard it, he wondered what the relationship was like between
Between
the
our
international brigaders and the militia, or the milicianos.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I heard you then.
Good.
The relationship was excellent. It couldn't be better. The subsequent to the, you know, in the beginning, when the brigades were purely brigades from elsewhere, they didn't get volunteers in fast enough to supply more men. They brought in the milicianos. They had the mixture became very strong, and the 15th Brigade, which was at one point called the English-speaking brigade, was made up of 3 English-speaking brigades and 1 Spanish, the 24th. As time went on, the 24th, not the 24th, but the battalions, the Lincoln, the MacPaps, the Mackenzie Papineaus, the Canadians, and so on, became more supplied by milicianos until, when I talk about the time after the recrossing of the Ebro, it was down pretty low. The Spaniards who fought alongside the international brigades always were very, very close to the men of the brigade, very close. They went that way with all the other brigades, but specifically in the English-speaking brigade. Absolute wonderful relationship. Well, we didn't have any big problems with the PUM group, you know, with the Trotskyite group, with the movie you may have seen, Land and Freedom. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, I saw it.
Where yeah, that's enough.
Were you going to?
Funny you should ask me. Also, I know more Irish songs than you do.
Probably seen the better too.
The picture. My wife would like you to see me in my non-deteriorated condition. You have to pick which one. You pass it around to the back. One of them is me.
You're not going to tell us which?
No. And while you do that, I'm not going to play that. All right. The song I told you about, Hans Bible, the tune is so beautiful and haunting. I'll try to see if you pick up that. Do something else. The national anthem of Spain is a thing called the Hymn de Diego. Hymn de Diego. And when we got there, everybody's singing. Everybody knows in Spanish, except all the dopey Americans who never learned the language of any other one except English. And so they made up words so that everybody would say, at least they're singing it, you know. But the tune goes, and what they were singing is, hooray for Barnum and Bailey, hooray for Barnum and Bailey, hooray for Barnum and Bailey, the circus is coming to town. And everybody thought it was wonderful. All right. Did you hear my Irish song? Yeah, all right. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Anybody wants any literature that of the war, there's a little list where you can order it if you want.
Now if you want to look at any of the publications, we have some new publications on the war. Okay. Thank you for coming.
I wrote you an email the other day. Did you receive?